Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jared Stoutmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Active Turnkey podcast. I'm your host, Jared Stoutmeister, and this is Tom Olson. He's owner of Olson Group, Good Success, Sarah Joe, all those companies that you're getting familiar with as you listen to us. So welcome back. Tom, how you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing today, Jared?
I am doing very well.
It's a little bit cooler today than it has been. It's been hot.
It's been hot. Yes. So it's been around 90 degrees.
I like hot better than rain.
Yes. Yeah, it is a better alternative. We've had record rain here in Northwest Indiana for 2 years. And it's been interesting. We're not going to do a topic on meteorologists.
No, we're not going to do
stuff.
The ark is not coming again. We're not going to build an ark.
I mean, no, we cannot guarantee that. However, we'll
I think we're way off topic today already, Jared.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that happened.
It's easy. I'm with you here. So, but no, this is Tom.
It's pretty bad when you have two scatterbrains on the same podcast.
It's a bad combo.
It can be pretty scattered.
All over the place. But before we get into the podcast, Tom, you actually have a couple things.
I have a couple things that I'm excited about. So me and Jared just talked before we got on this podcast, and we're going to start offering this at every podcast. If you guys want to wait till the next future episodes, that's okay. But if you actually, we actually wrote a book called The Active Turnkey, The Best Way to Buy Rentals. If you're interested in this book, you can find it on Amazon if you want to go buy it there. Yes, just go to Amazon and type in Active Turnkey. Mm-hmm. Or what you can do is you can go to goodsuccess.com, and then there's a store button there. You can find it there, and you can get your own hard copy for this. But for our listeners on the Active Turnkey podcast, what we have decided to do was create an ebook for you guys. Mm-hmm. So if you guys want a free ebook, listen to the next couple podcasts, because we're going to create a text code for you guys to be able to text us and to be able to get that free book. And really, this book talks a little bit about the process of Active Turnkey, which a lot of this podcast doesn't really talk about really Active Turnkey that much, even though it's called the Active Turnkey podcast. But it kind of like explains the BRRRR method and how to work with a provider like our companies, in order to be able to do that. And you guys can do that very simply. But half of this book isn't even about rentals or isn't about any of that. It's about financial freedom. And it really lays out a very simple plan about why real estate is one of the best ways to be able to get financial freedom, but really, how do you actually gain financial freedom, and giving yourself a really simple plan to be able to have financial freedom. Also, this was actually one of my last quarter goals to get done this last quarter, and we just finished it. So this is kind of hot off the press right here, what to expect from a great property manager. This is something else we're going to be offering shortly. We don't have it in ebook form yet, but it will be on Amazon, and we will be actually offering this to all of our people that we manage for, anybody else that wants to buy from us in the future, to kind of really understand that relationship between the property manager and the owner, and understand, what should you expect? What's your responsibility? What is the responsibility of the owner? And kind of going through that. And really, it's been really cool. One of the issues that we had is like a lot of people just call us up out of the blue. We don't know who they are, and they just want us to like vet 20 or 30 properties for them. Sure. And we're like, and it's all on the hopes that we're going to manage for them, right? Sure. And it's kind of funny because it's like, we started doing this thinking, yes, we're going to be out there, we're going to give, we're going to give first. And then like we go out and look at 30 or 40 properties, and they don't buy a single one of them. And we're like, all right, this isn't working. So we actually even created a program for people like that. If you're looking for us to be able to vet properties for you, we've actually created a program for you to be able to do so. And we really do want to add value, to people, whether it's in buying or selling turnkeys, but also in other aspects as well. Maybe you don't want to use this at all as your property manager, but you want, that some kind of advice, and you want to look at it or you want to have somebody else look at a property for you. We'd be glad to do that for you. But that's kind of at the end. But really, this goes through all the way, the top 3 things of a property manager, which, in my opinion, the number one most important thing for a property manager is exactly what we're going to talk about today.
That's interesting.
In my opinion, the top 3 things that a property manager does for you is fill vacancies, manage rents, and manage tenants. I mean, that's really and manage the property is kind of like in there as well with managing the tenant. But filling vacancy, in my opinion, if there's a vacancy, that should be the number one thing that the property manager is focusing on.
Sure.
For us, like, it is a big deal. If a property's vacant and if a property sits vacant for more than 21 days, it actually gets to me, and I actually want to review it, and I want to know what's going on. And we're making decisions, like we're meeting every week saying, what can we do this week to fill that property? And I looked at our scorecard today, and I don't think we've had a property sit for more than 21 days for months. Right. So to me, it's a very big deal. And we're going to talk about the process, right, today?
Yes.
So today we're going to talk about the process for filling a vacancy, and what does it look like? I mean, I'm assuming we're going to start with maybe the tenant moves out, maybe, or
that's exactly where we're at. So we're not going to go into the marketing process much at all today. So and Tom's right. So if it's been 21 days, this is probably from the podcast, but I actually had an investor who he bought a house from us, had a vacancy, came back. And the house, there was a longer vacancy than what we have. Our days on market are like 7 days right now, and he was expecting it to be 7 days. Come to find out, we were marketing it for a price. He bought the house for like $55,000 and was renting it for $850. Well, those numbers are sensational. And so when you really think about it, if you're wanting to get a house rented at $795, still works really well at the 55 price if you're looking just at the numbers. So there are different situations where you may want someone to go in and give you advice and get, as far as like the marketing piece. But that probably is for more of a different podcast. Today is just tenant turnover. So if you're involved in this, like for me, I actually had this happen just this past weekend. I had a tenant move out who's been in the house for about 3 years. And so we did do some of this. The property manager's probably, in fact, our property manager does more than what I did for my particular property. But we're going to go over that basically from the start to the finish, leading all the way up to the actual rehab. So what goes on, what takes place, what steps they take to get that turned over and bring that tenant in. So we'll get started. So,
all right, yeah.
So just jumping in right off the bat, one thing that they do that our property manager does proactively is they start with a 30-day, what they call walkout inspection. So they're going to go in there and 60 to 90 days before they even the tenant leaves, they're already asking the tenant, do you plan on staying? Or we're notifying them, say we do not have plans of renewing the lease. And so now they're going to schedule that 30-day inspection before they move out to just walk through the place and to check to get an idea about what's going on, what's happening. Tom, why would they do that? Why would they do a 30-day walkout inspection?
Why would you not do that? No, I'm just kidding.
That's really
yeah. Question. So no, that's a really good question, and it's actually. It's one of, and it's kind of funny. I did not know exactly where this was going to start or go. Jared just said, we got this ready. We're going to do this. And right. I kind of just like it to get to butt in my opinion. It's awesome. I was like, this is a great podcast. I just give my opinion all day. who really wants to hear my opinion? I don't think anybody does.
I do.
Jared's the only person. He's one person. But so really what we're saying is that tenant turnover doesn't start when the tenent moves out. Right. That's what we're saying is that being proactive is always better than being reactive, right? So, and I think that is actually a great point. And the more proactive you can be when a tenant is going to leave, and the more you can know when are they going to leave, getting all that information. I mean, the first thing you might want to think about is utilities. Who's going to make sure that utilities stay on? Absolutely. And knowing all those dates, like, as a property manager, they're probably wanting to call NIPSCO or call, water company and just make sure utilities don't get shut off, during that whole process. Because if that happens, like, who knows what, like utility turn on in Northwest Indiana can be a mess at times. But walking through the property and making sure that we like really tell them if we can. I mean, I know this doesn't happen on every single property, and sure. I've managed properties for over a decade, and I can tell you this doesn't happen every time. But our preference is to be able to get through the property, walk through even with them, and let them know, hey. We see this item, this corner here is cracked, this window, maybe the blind is missing, maybe this door is off its track. It looks like, there is a normal wear and tear when it comes to houses, and you can't expect the tenant to have to pay for every single nick and every single smudge on a wall. And, a court ruling will kind of say most things like paint has a 10-year lifespan. So if a tenant's been there for 10 years, they're probably not going to give you any money for paint. If there's holes in the wall, it's a different story. But there are certain things that have certain lifespans in your If you have carpet, for instance, that only has a 10-year lifespan, I know you might say, well, my carpet lasts 30 years. Well, according to the courts, at least in Indiana, they say they have a 10-year lifespan. That's why we like vinyl plank. That's why we like hard surface flooring. So those things have a much longer lifespan. But so that's the reason, in my opinion, you want to go over that checklist. So we have a check-in and a check-out list that we go over that with our tenants, and we let them know, hey, we go through every window, make sure they open and close properly, make sure all the doors lock properly, and then we just check for obviously other obvious big things that we can kind of be aware of that place, and really like what might be needed to get this place rent ready for the next person.
Absolutely, and we will go into detail about what those steps look like here. A couple things this does insinuate. Now, this is your typical standard what it's supposed to look like. It should be processed, right? And so this is what it looks
occasionally
like.
I'm sure you're going to have tenants that you have to evict that don't allow you in the property.
Exactly.
And they don't want you in the property because who knows what they're doing in the property. They probably have an extra dog that they're not supposed to have, or they probably have extra people in the house, or they're doing things in the house that they shouldn't do.
Correct.
I know nobody does that.
Hard to believe.
None of your tenants ever will, but it's just part of life. And again, it's not. I don't even think that's the norm, but that does happen, and it's probably 5% of the time where that's going to happen.
You also have life situations for tenants where we had one recently where someone just left.
Yep.
They just left. They had a job situation, and or a family
They
member
don't tell
passes
you.
away.
They
and
just leave.
Right.
They don't tell you, and then all of a sudden you find out, when the rent's due next month.
Exactly.
And there's no way to know
that.
really much you can do. I mean,
No.
so.
But in this case, this is our process, what we're doing. Now, one thing I want to add to that, though, that's really interesting to me that I kind of see there is in order to do all this is just the open communication. You're having open dialogue with your occupant, with a tenant, and you're working with them and you're coordinating with them. That means that you already have a communication line open with your tenant. That's just great to know. It's great to know that you have that type of conversation. You can talk to them about these things, and because the relationship for tenant and property manager can be adversarial in some situations. Everyone's heard of these stories, but it's in this situation it's creating that relationship where you're having open dialogue.
And I think over 50% of tenants have a good relationship with their property manager. I think it is probably like that 5%.
Yep.
It's like the 5% are like horrible and they're just, nasty. It's kind of like America right now. Like you have the 2% of America that's speaking louder than the other 98%, but that's kind of how it is in property managers as well. You do have those, small percentage of bad tenants, and everybody's going to have one once in a while. I've had them in my own properties. I've had them in my vacation rentals. I've had them in my rentals that I managed for people, 10, 12, 15 years ago. But really, the norm is to be able to have good communication with them, and for them to let you know that they're moving out, and for you to be able to go through this walkout process with them.
Absolutely. So that's just the first step, and then the next thing is you want to verify vacancy. We actually had a tenant just this past week. They were moving out, and this is a property we bought occupied, and we're going to do a rehab on it. So what do? We sent over our field guy. He went to check on it. They were moving out, so he went back the next day, verified they were gone. So that's
they gone?
They were gone
the
next
good.
day, right? So they said they'd be out one day. They were still moving out, and so it was
there
working
are
out the way it
some
was
rules
supposed to.
and some laws to understand. If you haven't done an eviction, there are even laws about their personal property that you have to abide by and know about, and we're not going to get into that today.
Sure.
But there are reasons for verifying that they are gone, and as soon as they're gone, if they leave stuff there, they do still have 15 days, at least in the state of Indiana, to come back and get their stuff if they've let you know, or if they've told you verbally or preferably in writing that stuff is going to be left there. That's kind of the reason why you want to verify that it's vacant, but also kind of verify stuff as well. It is an important piece of that because we've never had this issue. I don't think most tenants are going to go back on their landlord if they leave something there and they throw it away, but it is the law. So we are mindful of making sure that we're doing the right thing, even if the tenants don't always do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where documentation comes in. So naturally, this would be a time when they would start getting pictures and just saying what. And then at that point, when there's questions possibly down the road that could happen, we would have verification. There'd be documentation for what the condition of the house was like. So that's what they're doing. They're verifying the vacancy. Pretty simple. And then from right there, they change the locks. Day one.
Why would you want to change the locks, Jared?
Now, in my experience, my limited experience, is that there's a good chance that tenant may still have a key.
They might still have a key somewhere. Yeah.
And we have had it happen where in the previous in years past that where if they have that key, now they have a way to get in, and something may disappear.
We don't want that to happen.
They don't want it to disappear right away, because if you show right away, it goes against their deposit.
Yeah.
So why is this gone? But then if they still have the key, obviously it could be an issue. They're getting in, and you have no way. There was no break-in, so you're assuming the person had a key, and so on and so forth. So yeah, you want.
I think it's a good idea to change locks.
Yes.
Or some people, and I don't think we do this. We do this on our vacation rentals, but some people also, you can get smart locks in which you can change keys without actually changing the lock, and that I think over a long period of time that might be cheaper, but like from our experience, it's not much cheaper to just change locks each time when a tenant moves out.
Right. For one thing, we do this was a decision we did recently to provide value for our investors, was to start using the smart locks, because in the end it's going to cost us, the provider, a little bit more money, but we know that it's going to save the investor lots of money to use that smart lock, and now it's now more or less like a trip fee almost. It's gonna that and a little bit at the time to do that instead of changing locks every time, $75, $100, whatever the cost may be. So that is kind of a little bit of a.
So maybe spending a little bit more money up front and getting the smart locks is something. But you have to understand, in order to change a lock to the smart lock, you still have to have a new key. So
you do.
That might be a cost.
There's some cost,
there definitely might be some cost there as well, and some time, obviously, because somebody has to know how to be able to do that, and they have to go out there to do it anyway. So
where would someone reference something like that? They'd probably reference it in their property manager guide.
Yeah, I don't think this is in here at all. I don't think we're talking about that in the property management thing. But yeah, we're kind of getting way into the weeds with something like this. But that's kind of what this podcast is all about, is to kind of like get down into the nitty gritty and let people understand what it's really like to own rental properties. And at the end of the day, like I can tell you, most podcasts that talk about rentals, all they talk about is all the glory stuff. Sure. And to me, I just didn't want. I wanted to be really transparent. I wanted to be really genuine about what we're doing. And if I can talk about, we can talk all day long, every single day, about like rentals are the best things since sliced bread, and rentals will help you with your financial freedom. And I believe that. I really do believe that. I think it's helped me. It's helped a lot of my investors. I literally feel like I have investors that have retired or been able to be financially free just because of our company. And because I believe that, and because I've seen that, and a lot of that, and it doesn't happen overnight. It never does. No. And it doesn't happen with you just buying 5 or 10 rentals. It happens with a multitude of things, and it takes time to be able to bring value, in those houses and those neighborhoods go up in value. And whether or not you like it or not, appreciation is still part of the game. And I don't like play the game, but I do believe that it's part of the equation. So back to tenant turnover, which I think is this is a vital part. You want a property manager that is going to try to turn these properties over as quickly as they possibly can. And things do just take time sometimes. So sometimes you can't just find a tenant and, as soon as somebody tenant moves out, another tenant's moving in. Like, it's going to take a little bit of time to get in there, clean the place, maybe shampoo the carpets, maybe touch up the paint. And maybe get the place marketed, and then from the time that the place gets marketed, our goal is to be able to get a new tenant in within 14 days. Like that is our goal, and we do hit that way more than we don't, and we hit that over 90% of the time.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you talking through all that. And again, we add the smart locks and verify. I mean, this is verify and make. So you're right. We're getting in nitty gritty, but this does tell you what we're doing. It's transparent about what our services provide when you're using our property manager. I think that is important. So
not just us. Maybe you're managing your properties yourself, and
true.
You should probably be thinking about these things as you're turning over. So hopefully you are.
Yeah. So you're changing your locks. The next thing is your typical thing. You're going to walk through the house to make your list of repairs. So this is kind of like a two-pronged thing. Your list of repairs for what you believe you're going to do, but also you're comparing this to what kind of damage possibly the tenant may have had, to compare that with the deposit. Naturally, you should absolutely have a deposit. We have seen times where we've acquired houses where there was not a deposit. That's not wise. So not at all. So
don't
make sure
do that.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Honestly, like that leads us into a whole different discussion. But I actually do think there are times where you don't do a deposit, but there ought to be a reason for it. Let me just say it that way. Maybe that could be a whole other podcast on how to make extra money in your rentals. But I actually think sometimes you can make more money by not having a deposit. But
Interesting.
anyways.
He's angling up there for us.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll talk about
I'm a 6. I have to look at both sides.
There you go. There you go. And he did. So
Everything.
So we're going to walk through the house, and this is, again, very typical. We're going to walk through, find out what's going on there, put the list of repairs together, and then, like I said, compare it with what the condition of the property was beforehand. If there are any things that tenant, like you said, holes in walls, stains in carpet type of thing,
even if it's excessive paint, I mean, don't think that you can't charge a tenant for any paint at all. You can, if it's more than 10%. I mean, that's the thing. And more than 10% per year, like that's how a judge should look at paint and even carpet. If more than 10% of it is damaged, then absolutely the overage over 10% per year. If they've been in for 2 years, then the judge is going to look at like 20%. So if you have to repaint an entire house, like it probably anything more than 20%, if that tenant's been there for 2 years, should be able to be charged back to the to that old tenant. So in Indiana, I'm not sure what's on your page, but in Indiana, we have 45 days from the time the tenant leaves the property. So they are supposed to give us a 30-day written notice. That's their responsibility. And our responsibility, or any property management, it's not just us, but it's anybody, at least in Indiana, and I think different states are different on this, so don't quote me on this for your state. But in Indiana, we have 45 days from the day they move out. So let's just say they're moving out June 1st, and they send us a letter May 1st. So their requirement is to send it 30 days prior. They don't always do that. I'm just letting you know this is what they're supposed to do. So they send a letter out May 1st. They're moving out June 1st. So we have until basically July 15th to get them back their portion of the security deposit that we deem that they should get back. Now, in order for us to prove that, we are also supposed to have pictures, and we're also supposed to have a list and how much it costs us to fix those items that were tenant damaged, that were not necessary, that were not reasonable repair, reasonable, what do you call it, wear and tear. And we're supposed to then, so let's just say it's $1,000, and we think that the tenant, had $600 worth of stuff that we had to fix that was on them. Then we'll send back $400. We'll send back pictures, and we'll send back a list. And this is how much. These are the items that were on you, and this is why you're only getting back this much money. And then the rest of that, from a property manager's perspective, will get applied to what the owner may owe at that point in time. Because most of the time, 100% of the stuff is not tenant, not able to be charged back to the tenant. Normally, there's a portion of the items that probably are normal wear and tear, or are things that need to get done at the time. And sometimes this is a great time to be able to reevaluate a property. Absolutely. I don't know if you were going to get into this or not, but I really do believe this. Like sometimes, like for me, I'll tell you, if a house does not have granite countertops and it has a small kitchen, in my opinion, you should put granite or quartz countertops. I don't every time. To me, this is not even a question. I don't care what neighborhood it's in. And I know that you're going to have lots of people out there, gurus that want to say, do the house up to the neighborhood. I think it's a bunch of malarkey and crap. In my opinion, if a tenant moves out and the house is a small kitchen. Now, if it's a big kitchen and you're talking like $3,000, $4,000 for granite, I probably wouldn't do it. But a lot of times, these small kitchens that are in rentals are $900, $1,500, and the amount of rent, I promise you, you're going to get at least $50 more a month in rent. So if you just get $50 and it costs you $900, you tell me if that $600 that you're going to get more for a $900 investment is worth it to you. That's like a 50-60% ROI on your money. So this is something that I would be considering every time that there is a turnover, is like, is there something I could do to the property, or can I change the use of this property to be able to make more money? And a good property manager should be bringing these things to your attention and saying, hey, maybe we should do some landscaping, because maybe we're not going to get $795 for this property. We might get $850 if we actually do a couple $100 worth of work.
That was exactly the next thing we were going to discuss. After you're checking for damage and making your repair list, you're going to offer additional upgrades. And so everyone out there wants to give you the 2% increase in rent every year, or the idea of a 2% increase. Well, you have to also provide that same product every time. And so going in there and like he said, if they didn't have quartz before, we'd go in there and check to see exactly the same thing. And if you want to increase your rent, you got to bring the value to it, and so it kind of works that way. But yeah, you're gonna add additional upgrades and improvements. But again, these are all options. So the property manager is going to get this list together. So the repair is needed, but also some additional options, and then send it to the investor for approval.
I mean, some things are also to consider might be appliances at the time. There, and again, like a lot of this aren't big upgrades,
Right.
but some of these can just be really small things that make a huge difference. I'll be honest with you, something that is starting to get more and more popular is these outlets that actually have the USB plugs in them. I mean, to just put like 3 or 4 of those, a couple in the kitchen, maybe one in the bathroom or bedrooms or whatever, like you might not think about it, but like this is actually another great thing for a tenant to get as like a yearly gift that we like to do for our tenants that like renew with us every year over and over again. Try to give them, like, we call it an anniversary gift for them. Try to make it like a big deal for them to be able to sign a new lease. But doing something like that does improve the value and really like helps the tenant. Like, think about it. If a tenant is used to having all these USB plugs all over their house, like the next place they go to, they're going to be like, oh man, I wish I was back at the other place. And I have 4 of them in my house, and like I'm just wishing I had one in my bedroom, and I'm wishing I had one in other places. So just little things that don't cost an extreme amount of money. For $50 might go a long ways to be able to make that new tenant like really think that your place is better than the other places they're going to look at.
So really, that's most of a list. Once we get into the next stage, more or less, is the rehab process. Once the investor goes through, they're kind of coordinating with the property manager the repairs, and if they want to do any extras, if there's anything recommended. At that point, it's just moving on, what we would say, into a new process, which would be the rehab process. So at that point, the property manager would be coordinating with the contractor, checking on the repairs and how getting timelines and all that stuff, and then you get the deadline. Then you're moving more into once it's finished, you're moving into the cleaning and marketing process. So today we wanted to focus just on a simple process, a basic process called the tenant turnover, where we get a little bit nitty gritty, not too long, but enough to tell you exactly what's happening. And of course, there are other things that we may be doing throughout the process. Throughout this, but this is the core focus, the core process that we're doing. Yeah,
some of the big items, you want to make sure the utilities get turned over, make sure that lawn and snow removal starts happening on the property manager side instead of the tenant taking care of. And as soon as you get that list ready to go, like we want to get in there, and you want to get in there if you're managing your own properties and get those repairs done as quick as possible. Hopefully, hopefully within a day or a week, to get started, and then really hopefully like not too long after that you can get that place marketed. And from the time the place gets marketed, obviously you want to get it rented as fast as you can. But this is where the most money, in my opinion, gets sucked up, is on these turnovers. So you really want to try to focus on getting this done as fast as you possibly can, and also try to be as efficient as you possibly can with this whole tenant turnover. So really, like, the next big step would be to get it marketed, and then from there, it all kind of starts all over again with that check-in process, which we'll probably do another podcast at some point about signing up a new tenant, from the time you market a property to the time you actually sign them up, and all the steps that are involved in that.
Yeah, I really appreciate the very beginning of the podcast. You talked about speed. A lot of guys want speed. It's really important to get this in and out. Slap some paint on it. Let's get it marketed and re-rented. But I think it's really important to go through the process, make sure you're catching everything. You want to recreate that experience that the first tenant would have had when you did the rehab, when it was fresh and clean. And also you want to be able to catch things or add some opportunities that could really raise the value. And so if you're rushing it too much, you may miss out on that opportunity. So yes, we want to get done as quickly as possible, but also taking the proper steps and trying to add value to both the property and for the tenant. So I thought you very poignant.
Well, you definitely need to have balance there, but at the end of the day, like, quicker is always better, but you definitely don't want to miss steps. Absolutely. No. I totally agree.
Well, that's all we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast and hope you enjoyed the information. And remember, we do build rental portfolios for investors. So if you're looking to add to your portfolio or you're looking to start, we'd be happy to help you guys. You could reach me at jared@byolsongroup.com, or you can visit our website, byolsongroup.com.
And that's BUY, like you buy a house. Because we know everybody that's listening to this is going to want to buy houses from us.
The next question would be, why would you not?
Yeah, why would you not?
Why would you not?
I mean, I do.
Sure.
You do.
Absolutely.
I mean, we do. So
right. I am.
We're being leaders in this.
That's right. Next week I think I have 3 closings on properties.
Awesome.
So
yes.
Yeah.
So buyolsongroup.com. That's
Yeah.
BUY, and then it's OLSON group.com. And then if you want to get a hold of Jared, it is Jared at buyolsongroup.com.
Absolutely. If you're interested, we can get you on our list. We send out weekly opportunities, and if you'd like to get added, you can reach me there. And thank you for joining us, Active Turnkey.
The best way to buy rentals.
Thanks, guys.
Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.